Thank you, everybody from around the world who's tuning in to our Webex today. I'm Michael Goldberg. I'm the professor for the class. We realize some of you may be up late, up early to join this Webex. This is our second Webex. As we've done with previous Webexes, we will be recording this session and making it available to folks later. We are live actually at Flashstarts, which is a seed accelerator here in Cleveland, Ohio, in our theater district. It's actually the second largest theater district in the United States. It's called Playhouse Square, so we're happy to be here. I have one panelist with me, and what we'll do, Deborah Hoover, and what we'll do is I'll ask our panel just to quickly introduce themselves, and then we'll get to questions from the chat. So for those of you who are joining in Webex, please send your questions, alert our team that you've got a question, and we'll go to you via audio or video and audio if you have it. So Deborah, why don't we start with you if you can quickly introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Deb Hoover, and I'm the president and CEO of the Burton D. Morgan Foundation. There was some discussion about our foundation in the video this evening. And I also serve as chair of the Fund for Our Economic Future. Our foundation has been involved for the full 10 years of its history.
Great. Thanks, Deb. Brad, how about we'll go over to you?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Brad Whitehead. I'm president of the Fund for Our Economic Future. And the fund, as you heard from the video, if you saw it, is a collaboration of the philanthropic community in Northeast Ohio, where we're working to advance a long-term economic program in our community. And entrepreneurship sits right in the middle and at the foundation of that plan. So it's great to be here.
Great. Thanks, Brad. Yep. Hiep, can you hear me? If you can introduce yourself, please, Hiep.
Oh, yes. Hi, my name is Hiep, and I am now the MBA candidate from Babson College. I have experience, about 6 years experience working with two international donors to support small and medium enterprise to accelerate their innovation idea in Vietnam. Yes, it's great to be here.
Great. It's nice to see you. Hiep and I are old friends from my time in Vietnam together. We worked together. And Michael, thank you for joining. If you can introduce yourself.
Hi, yes. Thanks very much, Michael. Hello to everybody. My name is Mike East. My title is Business Incubation Specialist with the World Bank, specifically with a program called InfoDev at the World Bank, which focuses on supporting entrepreneurship around the world, so in developing countries where the World Bank works. We work with a variety of business enablers, we call them, so they could be accelerators such as Flashstarts there, but working in places like South Africa or India, Vietnam, Ghana. So we try to support entrepreneurship in a variety of different countries around the world.
Great, and thanks. And last but not least, from the Las Vegas airport, David Levine. Okay, we can't hear you yet, David. Just wave to us if you can hear us. Okay, all right, we'll come back to David. Suzanne, do we have a question yet from the chat room? Okay, so let me start, and Deb, maybe I'll start with you. We had a comment in one of our discussion forums from Tina Bilani from Belize, and she was talking about something that we sort of covered in the MOOC session. She said, typically seeing results in any startup companies do take decades. What incentives can be used in sustaining donor interest and funding and supporting these new entrepreneurs? Are there any specific ways that you can recommend keeping that patience?
And I think that's a really good question, and I noted what Brad said in the video about sustaining donor interest in entrepreneurial endeavors. It's about seeing progress, celebrating milestones along the way, and understanding that it is really a long-term prospect, and then iterating along the way, seeing where you may have gone slightly astray and figuring out how to correct that, and involving donors and stakeholders in that process, I think keeps everybody engaged.
Great. Brad, you, in your role at the fund, and Deborah's foundation is one of the members, she's the chair, but in some ways they were an easy sell. They support entrepreneurship. What the fund, maybe one of the great stories of the fund is the ability to bring in other funders that hadn't traditionally supported entrepreneurship, and also this question of the patience that it takes to see success. Maybe you can sort of reflect back on kind of the early days of putting the fund together, and how did you convince funders to take the long view on this?
Well, it's an excellent question. And I think it comes down to both the momentum narrative and then also the way we think about the metrics. But the first point in terms of why was this of interest to donors who might have as their primary intent everything from early childhood education or arts and culture and so forth. And it was, I think, incumbent upon us to make sure we made the link that at the foundation of all that's good in society is a healthy and vibrant economy, and that at the core of a healthy and vibrant economy is an innovative and entrepreneurial economy. And so that was the pitch made in the video, but it really did play out in boardroom after boardroom in our philanthropic groups, was that you really need to have the next generation of wealth if you're going to be able to sustain all the things that you value as a society. In terms of the time frame, as Deb was just saying, one needs to think about the progression of metrics so that you can show momentum. And so in the earliest days, one thinks about things like numbers of startups or capital coming in, and it's only through time that you can start looking at real significant impact in the economy in terms of jobs, product, revenues, and so forth. And so we were quite conscious in the early days that it was about businesses getting started and capital coming into businesses.
Let me, before we get to our sort of international perspectives, David Levine, welcome. Can you hear us? Okay, we can't hear you. Not yet.
Okay.
Can we hear you, David?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we can. I think they're calling your flight. I hope you don't miss your plane. David, maybe you can comment from the perspective of building a business. You were an early investee of Jumpstart, and we'll be talking more about Jumpstart in our course next week. But it takes a long time to see entrepreneurial success. When you think about funders like the Fund for Our Economic Future or the Burton D. Morgan Foundation that have sort of indirectly put money into wireless environment, do you think that there's sort of a line, I mean, and from your view and kind of what you see in Cleveland, do funders sort of get that this is going to take a long time? Does it align with how long it takes to sort of build and grow a business?
It's interesting. In a way, a group like Jumpstart runs interference with the connection. So we don't have much direct interaction with the philanthropy organizations. All I can tell you is that the ecosystem that they have laid down with Jumpstart, with Glide and Lorain County Community College's services has allowed the area to develop better entrepreneurs, and it's almost like a university that has multiple disciplines that have been expanding over time. As the philanthropies put more money that's guided, the ecosystem builds up, and we get a whole group of entrepreneurs that make the ecosystem grow exponentially.
Okay, great, David. Let me quickly go to Suzanne. There's a question from Webex that you can chat about.
This is from Brenda. The gentleman from Endeavor said that he did not believe donors were patient worldwide. Why do you think donors are so patient in Northeast Ohio?
Deb, you want to try that one?
Well, I think it comes partially from the stage setting that was done with the Plain Dealers series on the quiet crisis. I mean, we've had real challenges to face here. And as you heard, I mean, we were worried about jobs. We were also worried about the viability of some of our foundational institutions like the Cleveland Museum of Art. If we don't have a vibrant economy here, we can't support any of that other wonderful stuff that we have here. We were in a very bad way. So I think we saw how much trouble we were in. It was going to take us a really long time to get out of that trouble. And I also think it's what Brad was referring to. We look at this work in phases. So we're not just looking at, 3 years, okay, we're going to do all this work and we're going to be done. We know we're not going to be done, but we keep changing it up. We keep measuring things, seeing the progress, and then figuring out very strategically what the next steps need to be to move things along. And fortunately, we see progress, and so that keeps the momentum going.
Great. Now, Hiep, you've worked for organizations. I know you worked for an organization funded by the Finnish government while you were in Vietnam around supporting entrepreneurship. You know, sort of implied in the question was this sort of impatience that donors overseas may have around supporting entrepreneurship. What was your experience in working and supporting entrepreneurship in Vietnam working for a Finnish government-funded project?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I have experience working with both projects funded by Finland government and Danish government also support for entrepreneurship, and each one have certain advantage and disadvantage. For the common advantage is that they all look at the criteria like the job create, the number of jobs create, the number of like the amount of income increased by the project, and how many people could have better access to the quality and more affordable goods and service, something like that. But the common disadvantage of the program is that there will be a certain charge for the support of donor in terms of efficiency. There may be sometimes because the donor they have also the pressure of disbursement, so sometimes they try to spend on not very efficient way. And another check is that there is possibility that the support will distort the market, that they give so much support to one entrepreneur and they will create the entry barrier to the later entry. Yes.
Interesting. I know we've talked about some of that, things that happen in the market when there's too much support for one kind of company and that it can distort the market. Is there, yes, Suzanne?
We have a question from Daniel in Brazil. Is it possible to change cultural behavior in places where people are not used to making donations?
Mike, do you want to try that one?
Sure. Cultural behavior is that's one of the hardest things to change, right? You know, what we've done at InfoDev, and just to maybe give an example, is we've worked with angel investor networks in places where there haven't been angel investors in the past. And so what we've done is we've gone in, set up some meetings with local high net worth individuals. So we've done this in Nigeria, for instance, and there was no angel investor network, but there's lots of wealthy people in Nigeria, right? So we went to Lagos, we brought some smart angel investors from the US and Europe. We met with the Nigerian angel investors, had a few meetings, and we left. But lo and behold, a couple of years later, there's still a Lagos angel network. They're starting to scout and make investments in local businesses. And it's a matter of just putting them together. So you can actually promote a different mindset in places where there wasn't that mindset of philanthropy previously. So it can happen, but cultural change is a long-term thing. You need to find the right people. And even with the question earlier about does, you know, are donors willing to be patient with building an entrepreneurial ecosystem? It really comes down to people quite frequently. The same way you need to find the best entrepreneurs to invest in, you need to find the best donors and the best people who are not bureaucrats, who can take a long-term view and can appreciate what you're doing over the long term. And so you have to find the right people, whether it's finding entrepreneurs or finding good philanthropists.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Yep,
Michael?
John?
Oh, sorry. Okay, did someone, Brad, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I just because this has been so central to our work, I just wanted to spend one moment because I very much like the question. And we at the fund have thought about our work at 3 levels. levels and are intentional at that is that building entrepreneurship isn't just a matter of starting a single accelerator and expecting transformational things to happen. So we've thought at the level of, well, what is happening right there with companies, and what kind of impact are we having on capital and company formation and so forth. But at the same time, we've realized that it takes a whole system that needs to be built, and so we have metrics and thinking around what are the whole system that needs to be built. And then more directly to the question from Brazil, is that it does require a cultural change in addition. And to me, that's where I think it's interesting that we do have donors involved, because we had intentional strategies of getting out to community influencers to try to make the case for entrepreneurship and why this tied to the larger issues and what it meant to the overall economy to be pursuing this. And so it was quite an intentional outreach, education, and engagement strategy around what we were doing. And we tried to look at attitudes before as well as attitudes later.
Great. Deb, you wanted to make a comment?
And if I could just add to that, I think it's also been interesting in Northeast Ohio. Our foundation, the Burton D. Morgan Foundation, is really focused almost exclusively on supporting entrepreneurship and the entrepreneurial ecosystem here in Northeast Ohio. So we are definitely in it for the long haul. That is in fact, what our donor wanted us to do. So we've invested through the fund, and then we make a lot of our own investments. But I think as time has gone on, now a decade of working through the fund, and people donors seeing what's possible through philanthropy for entrepreneurship, there are a lot more foundations in our region that are becoming interested in doing this work. Some very specific segments of the work for high school students and younger children who may learn through Lemonade Day. There are just lots of ways that donors can get involved, and that's also another way. If you look at creating a pipeline of people who are interested in entrepreneurship, it's another way of looking at this, over a long-term prospect.
Great, thanks, Suzanne.
Okay, from John. What funding approval weighting do you place on enterprises specifically and profitably addressing social, environmental, and economic resiliency and offering solutions for climate change mitigation and adaptation? Do you encourage these types of opportunities?
Okay, so it's sort of in the social realm. Michael, maybe I'll send that to you. I mean, how much of what you do at InfoDev, when you think about the metrics that matter, how much does social play a role? How much of it is sort of return on investment oriented, and other sort of metrics that matter to you?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a good question because we're the World Bank, and our mission is to work on reducing poverty and improving sustainable development. So of course, everything we do has to consider social and environmental impacts. On the other hand, a lot of the research that backs the work I do shows that you really want profitable businesses that are sustainable and grow quickly and create jobs and create wealth. And through that, you can then have spillover effects on the environment and on social issues. So our mindset at InfoDev is, first, we want to build sustainable businesses. And then second, we want to make sure that they do have the impacts that we're looking for on poverty, on girls' participation in entrepreneurship, women and girls, these type of issues. Specifically, we have a program I work on climate technology, where we set up what we call climate innovation centers, which are essentially clean tech hubs for clean tech entrepreneurs around the world. And it's sort of at least a double bottom line there, where if you have a profitable clean tech business, you're going to build up resilience to climate change. You're going to improve the environment, or at least reduce harm on the environment. So we do look for these double, triple bottom line businesses. But if you don't have a sustainable, fast-growing business, your impact's going to be limited to in any case.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Suzanne?
We have a question from Ekta in Belize, and I apologize if I pronounced your name incorrectly. How can a community engage the young generation into philanthropy?
Great question. Maybe Hiep, let me bring you into the conversation there. I mean, philanthropy, as Vietnam has gone through its own sort of economic transition, it's new, philanthropy is new. How would you address that question of sort of how, in a place like Vietnam, how do you bring kind of a next generation of philanthropists into it? And in Vietnam, it's probably like the first generation of philanthropists.
Yeah, recently I think that's quite interesting question, because that is a critical question for Vietnam now, is how to engage the philanthropists into entrepreneurship. And nowadays, actually, we emphasize on the job creation and how they bring to help the poor people. And recently in Vietnam, there are more and more success entrepreneurs who spend or reserve some part of their revenue and profit to bring back to the society to support the younger entrepreneur. And that is, in Vietnam, we don't have like in US. That's when philanthropy can donate. They can get the tax free. But now more and more people are interested in like that. For instance, in Vietnam, we have coming up like from the Trung Nguyên Coffee, and they are building a fund to support their young entrepreneurs. Yes.
Great, thanks. Deborah, do you want to also add something?
I think in answering that question, and it's a really good question, it's important to remember that the funds that flow through philanthropic organizations, most of those funds were generated through entrepreneurial endeavors. So I think as young people are learning about how to be entrepreneurs, hopefully successful entrepreneurs, that there's a way to connect this ethos of philanthropy into starting a business, into generating revenue. And I know with some of our youth programs, Lemonade Day is a great example. There's a component of that where kids are staging lemonade stands, taking in revenue, and then a portion of those dollars, most of the children designate for some philanthropic or nonprofit kind of cause. So it's an important message for them to connect, where the dollars flow, not just back into the company or into their pockets, but also, to charitable endeavors.
Great. Looks like we have a question. No, Matthew is joining.
Matthew, you are live with the panel.
Oh, thank you. I was just wondering, in terms of for startups, how does it work in terms of coordinating with nonprofits? And in particular, if there's any issues in dealing with more of an issue-based nonprofit in terms of how it might be marketed?
Okay. Brad, do you want to try to answer that one, or maybe we could clarify with Matthew?
Michael, I'm wondering if you might explain more when you say the issue that you see with an issue-based nonprofit. Just want to make sure we're answering your question directly.
Yes, in terms of if it's, say, working with a nonprofit that tends to be a bit issue-based, or if that organization does things that are issue-based, if that can come back to maybe harm a startup or help to a point.
Yeah, that's an interesting question and dilemma, and the way we've I think resolved that in our mind in Northeast Ohio is by really focusing on organizations whose sole purpose is to be supporting entrepreneurial entities, as opposed to kind of entities that might have other issues that are dominant, and then the entrepreneurship would be secondary, with maybe the exception of universities and hospitals. And so then what we'll do is we'll support this group that's working on entrepreneurship, whether that's Jumpstart or another intermediary, but then we have expectations of them about making sure that they're addressing issues we care about. For instance, that they're inclusive to urban populations or things of that sort.
Great. Thanks, Brad. Suzanne?
We have a question from Miguel. Hi, Michael. I'm from the Dominican Republic. And would like to know if you have a program that supports entrepreneurs. I have a project and am looking to patent it in my country, the USA, and Europe.
Well, that might be a good one for our friends at the World Bank. I mean, Michael, I'm sure you get lots of questions from folks around the world, kind of given the broad reach. I mean, sort of where does InfoDev work, and how do folks like Miguel kind of plug in to the kinds of organizations that InfoDev might fund to provide resources?
Yeah, on the question about where InfoDev works, we usually look for sort of an entrepreneurial ecosystem that's got enough dynamism and activity to get something going, but we're not also going to work in Shanghai necessarily. That's got a lot going on already. So we look at places like Kenya or Ghana, Vietnam, places like that have enough development and entrepreneurial activity that we can go in and just provide a little catalyst to get things moving a little bit faster. We do have programs in the Caribbean. We have one called the Entrepreneurship Program in the Caribbean, which has the great acronym of EPIC, and it does provide some resources for folks like Miguel. We don't put a lot of emphasis on patenting. We do, some of our programs do offer help with intellectual property, but we find in most developing countries, and actually others can probably comment on this as well, that there's usually an overemphasis on patenting. It can be a great source of for an entrepreneur, but in 90% of the cases, you're better off building your business focusing on your other aspects and not patenting unless you truly have a novel technology. But we do have lots of resources, and I sent a few to Miguel, some links on the Q&A chat box here.
Great. Thanks, Michael.
We are going to George in Boulder, Colorado. George, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
We sure can.
Excellent. Thank you. I was just curious if you can talk a little bit about the mechanics or the process of how money flows from philanthropic dollars flow from donor to entrepreneur and what the donors expect in return. In the U.S., we have things like donor advised funds and mission-related investments and program-related investments. Are those the kinds of instruments we're talking about?
Okay. Do you want to start, Deb?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So, so the dollars, and I have to talk wearing two different hats. So the dollars that the Fund for Our Economic Future donates to an organization like Jumpstart, those dollars are not going directly to the entrepreneurs. They're going to Jumpstart to provide services to those entrepreneurs. Now, wearing my private foundation, my Burton D. Morgan Foundation hat, some of our dollars have gone to an organization like Jumpstart, also for services, but also into an evergreen investment fund that they have. So have gone through that channel to be invested in startups. And then there are several other ways that we can be supportive. We could actually use some of our endowment funds, and we do invest locally through funds that are being invested directly into startups here. But those are dollars that come out of our investment funds. And then there also is the program-related investment vehicle. That is really a loan, at a low-interest loan that's being made to an organization that is supporting startups. We presume that there'll be revenue generated from a program-related investment that would be paying back that investment over time, and that is, of course, the hope. If it doesn't work out as an investment, that's something that can be later on converted to a grant.
Maybe Brad, just to add, if in terms of giving some international context, because I think it's helpful, and it's a very good question that you asked, George, in terms of sort of the different ways that foundations can be supportive. Brad, maybe talk about a little bit, and we're going to get to it in week 5 of this course in terms of how donors and government are supporting funding vehicles like venture capital. Maybe you can talk a little bit about philanthropy, and Deb referred to it as investors in venture capital funds, and then the expectation that philanthropies have in making money on that investment, as well as doing some economic development, local good.
Yeah, surely so. And I think part of what Deb was laying out was the fact that there is no one thing that is happening. And so I'll get specifically to your question on investing off the balance sheet. And it's likely to be unique to every country. But what isn't unique to every country is probably the aspect that there is a certain amount of capital that's needed for entrepreneurs, and it would be desirable to have an investment return to the investor for that direct capital to entrepreneurs. Yet there may be a set of other capabilities needed in your country, whether that is the education and awareness topic that we dealt with earlier, or whether it is entrepreneurial services and so forth, where one can't expect market-based returns, and that's where the donor has the role to play that may be more grant as opposed to investment related, whether that donor is a government donor, a foundation donor, or another philanthropic donor. But then, Michael, to your question, the piece that is also in here is that traditionally in the United States, the foundation community have been largely traditional with respect to the assets on their balance sheet. And so another part of the effort has been to work to see that there might be a portion of the balance sheet that can be used for alternative investments. And as part of that bundle of alternative investments, can there be dollars that would support an indigenous venture capital industry? And frankly, it has been easier to get philanthropy to be thinking about the grants for services and such than it has been to be thinking about the alternative investment vehicle of taking a portion of that balance sheet and putting it into, say, a venture fund on a limited partner basis. But there's been strong progress in recent years in that regard.
Great, thanks for that context. Suzanne?
We have a question from Charlotte in Belize. How important is it to incorporate entrepreneurship or philanthropy in our school curriculum, possibly from an early age, to change the current mindset of getting an education and then finding a job working for someone else?
I know you do a lot of, that's right up your alley.
It is. So another great question. So I've touched upon this. So this is mainly wearing my Burton D. Morgan Foundation hat. We have believed over the last decade that it's really important to support the integration of entrepreneurship education into really all kinds of subjects, whether that be math, science, economics, art, music. It's very important to get children from a young age, and our programs start as young as second grade. And some of that happens in the classroom. Some of it happens outside the classroom. And then just building opportunities and building bridges from one level of entrepreneurship education to the next, so that it runs from the grade school through middle school, high school programs, and then on up into college, community colleges, and universities. So one interesting program that we're funding here at the collegiate level is our Blackstone Launchpad program, which is an experiential program program, open to all students on a campus, no matter what they're studying, so that they can have an opportunity to develop their idea into a venture. So we absolutely believe in the importance of entrepreneurship education and think it's a critical component of changing a culture. You're not only working with the children and with young people, you're carrying that message home to their parents and to their extended families. So it's absolutely critical.
Great. Thanks, Deb. Suzanne?
We have a question from Greece. In Greece, the most donors and investors in philanthropy are matched with government and vice versa. The way to match donors and government programs is generally that very big companies lobby. So any suggestion to have a piece of this pie? Thanks.
Okay, let's try to unwrap that, and thank you for staying up late in Greece. Michael, do you want to take that? I mean, this question, I know, the World Bank, you have a number of donors that you're working with. Those donors are often governments. Maybe you can talk about that balance and some of the programs that you guys are funding between donor and government and sort of how the relationship works together.
Yeah, let me say a couple things. One is that the difference between philanthropy, foundations, and government is, to a large extent, the foundations and philanthropists can operate much more freely and much more nimbly. So they're much better suited, I think, to support these types of entrepreneurship programs. Most of the World Bank funding actually goes through governments in different countries, and then the government will run a program. My group, because actually we're supported with donor money, we give directly to the organizations such as the venture accelerators, the mentor networks, and other folks that would work with entrepreneurs. So we get around working with the government. I also have a bit of maybe a bias that says entrepreneurs and government don't mix that well together. Sure, you need to have a good environment that the government supports in the long term, but really entrepreneurs often succeed in spite of the government rather than because of the government. So I think you really want to try to separate them if you're trying to work with foundations. Avoid the ones that are, spending their time with the government, lobbying them, trying to do things jointly, and try to work with the foundations that are willing to go out on their own and not sort of be directed by the government. Go look for the independent ones, and I know there's got to be some of those out there in Greece, even if it's a minority. So hopefully that answers the question a bit.
Great, thanks, Michael. Suzanne?
We have another question from Charlotte. We are currently putting together a proposal to grow entrepreneurship in our local communities with emphasis on youth employment. What would be the best angle to approach this project? This is besides entrepreneurial training and seed capital investment. What are some innovative ideas to ensure the success of this project?
And I think, and maybe one of the core of the question here is because we talk a lot in the course about, the sort of the most fundable opportunities, and sometimes things like youth entrepreneurship that may be sort of foundation funded. Maybe these aren't necessarily sort of the bankable ideas that a venture capital fund or an angel fund. I mean, Deb, do you have any sort of thoughts for sort of a group that was sort of looking at trying to get support for youth entrepreneurship? What path they might take to do that?
Well, I think when you think about youth entrepreneurship, you're really thinking about it as being a fundamental part of a student's education so that they can start to envision their future, think about what they might want to do. It's an experiment for them. They're not sure necessarily that they want to become an entrepreneur, but all the time they're learning skills that they can apply, on their educational path, but that they can also apply in analyzing what they may want to do for their, for their career long term. So it's all about skill building.
Great.
We have a question from Yvette, also from Belize. Do you also look at the training or level of education of the entrepreneur in addition to the profitability of the project?
Maybe I'll take that over to you, Hiep. When you think back to the work that you did in Vietnam and backing different entrepreneurs, what were the different factors in terms of, as entrepreneurs would sort of apply for funding, what were the different factors that led you guys to back entrepreneurs?
Excuse me, I couldn't hear very clearly.
I was just saying, this is more on the criteria when you look, when you were doing funding programs in Vietnam with donor money, what was the criteria that you were looking for to back, to provide support?
Yeah, for the criteria we receive the support is first is either the project idea new. I mean, anybody else have done it before, and is there any new? And the second is the feasibility of the project, whether the company have capability to do it, and there would be the financial viable ability of the project, whether the project will be financial sustainability. That is the main criteria to support. And for the donor aspect, they come further with the number of jobs, how large impact to involve the poor into the project. I mean, that creates the income for the poor. And some of the projects that we want to see how they can accelerate the export environment in Vietnam, for instance. It depends. Yes.
Great. Thanks, Hiep. Suzanne?
We have a question from Jamie. Do you know any organization with free or low-cost teaching materials or tools for a high school entrepreneurship course? These tools can be web-based.
Deb?
Sure. Well, I'm thinking we have the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, which has materials that have been specifically developed for high school students. And then we also have here in Ohio through it's the Believe in Ohio program, has a series of videos that are online, free, that describe all of the elements of the Northeast Ohio ecosystem that we're discussing this evening. So that is a web-based tool that you can access online.
Great. Suzanne?
We have a question from Sergio. I think this is very interesting. The entrepreneurial mindset is not taught in high school, for instance. Is there a program that thinks on getting this kind of education to the basic education to generate more entrepreneurship in the future? We teach to be workers, and all our lives we are taught to get a job. We are not taught to create a job.
That's a great question, Sergio. Thank you. Maybe, and I'll reframe it a little bit and ask it to you, Brad. I mean, there's been a number of programs, both kind of donor-funded and government-funded here, that look at some of our strength at universities, for example, or our hospitals, where we're leveraging institutions. So this sort of presumes our folks are sort of coming up through the ranks, getting trained, and then coming up with ideas. Maybe you can talk for a second, Brad, about the different types of programs from a donor perspective and sort of trying to take advantage of entrepreneurs that are sort of coming up through the system and then providing that capital to help them commercialize their technologies into businesses.
Yeah, although frankly, I think Deb Hoover may be even better positioned to talk through this, but I think kind of embedded in that question as well is the fact that it's not just a matter of making capital available. It is, one needs to have an intentional strategy to build the entrepreneurial instincts and capabilities in a community. And that, as one of the callers and questioners said, it begins in high school and even middle school. And I guess, we've got the Burton D. Morgan Foundation that may even be taking it earlier with their Lemonade Day stands, but building those entrepreneurial instincts through And then in our universities, we've got them kind of inculcating that into not only the engineering departments, but it's actually permeating all aspects of some of the universities. So for instance, at Oberlin College, which is known for having a world-class musical conservatory, there has been an intentional effort to have those students think of themselves as entrepreneurs. And then as the research-based institutions have built their commercialization departments, they have needed to have intentional strategies to reach into the organizations, not only to find business ideas and so forth, but also to cultivate this spirit of yes, I'm both a researcher, but also a latent or potential entrepreneur. And so that message is that it's not enough to have a capital available. One needs to build a culture of entrepreneurship.
Great, thanks. And if you want to take it there, I think maybe what we can do is sort of have a couple comments for you on that, Deb, and maybe just a couple of reflections on the panel. We're going to sort of wind down the panel, but maybe I know you do a lot of work in funding that education space.
We do, and so we're talking about grants and financial resources to support all of this work. At the end of the day, it's not just about the financial resources. It's about building a network of people and having role models for students, who are coming up through these programs. So that's about internships. That's about mentorship for high school students, for college students, and then mentors for entrepreneurs who are starting ventures once they're out of the university setting. And so part of the work that our Burton D. Morgan Foundation does in the region is wrapping around the grants that we make all of the connections and other services that really help to bolster the strength of those grants. So that's very, very much tied to the strength of the ecosystem that we have here in Northeast Ohio. So it really becomes, a full community effort. And we've seen that effort grow and expand exponentially over the decade that we've been working in this way. So that's another point that's really gratifying and keeps us moving, keeps us looking to the future.
Great. I guess we'll take one more question and then just some final thoughts from the panel.
We have a question from Cynthia. Do the most successful projects solve existing problems and fulfill existing needs? Or do they create whole new markets for things that don't exist yet? Who's more likely to get those funds?
Michael, do you want to take that? I don't know if you were you might have been chatting with somebody else on another question. Yeah.
No.
Okay.
It's a challenging question. So the question, I guess, is whether the philanthropists in this case are more interested in trying to see what's already in the ecosystem maybe and funding that, or looking for people who really want to break out new markets. I think most donors are pretty conservative, unfortunately, so you're not going to, there's hesitance to try to find the next Apple that's going to create blue sky markets, and more likelihood they'll fund stuff that they know. So this may or may not be the best approach, but I think it's more likely that they'll look for existing businesses or business concepts that they can support and scale up. Though I'm sure the world might be a better place if the philanthropists and others really got behind some of this blue sky research and entrepreneurial ideas.
Great. All right, with that, let's just sort of have some final thoughts here. Any sort of closing thoughts? I mean, we sat together in 2012, actually, when the idea for this MOOC sort of came to be with the Vietnamese National Agency for Technology and Entrepreneurship. Vietnam sort of for the first time from a government perspective and from philanthropy really supporting entrepreneurship. How much progress has Vietnam made, and how much further do they still have to go?
It's interesting because yes, Vietnam in 2012, the Vietnam government commit with the government of Finland to contribute part of about 10% of the budget of the organization budget to give direct support to the private sector. That is the first, I think that's first initiative and first movement, because before that, it is not much support from the government to the private sector. So that is a good signal. But I think that there are a long way, still a long way for the Vietnam to go to support the entrepreneur, because yes, the government is a little bit hesitant in terms of how to measure the support and how to get the support back. I mean, that's the return of the investment. That is the question that the government have to think and have to consider. Yes.
Great, thanks, Yep. I mean, Brad, I know we've made a lot of progress in 10 years, and we still have a long way to go. Any kind of thoughts about, as you look to the next decade in terms of what we've accomplished, what's been accomplished in Northeast Ohio? What have we accomplished, and what worries you going forward?
Yeah, you know, it has been gratifying to be a part of something that has seemed to have made a difference. But you know, inside the Fund for an Economic Future, we say, what do we call that? A good start. And there is this recognition that this is something that will be decades in the making. And I think if there's two things that we think about going forward that may be useful to those of you around the world, is one is we must constantly resist the temptation to be thinking that there is a silver bullet. And it's going to be unique in all of your different countries and all of your different markets. But it's probably unrealistic to think that it's either just a capital issue or just an entrepreneurial cultural issue or just an education of donors issue. That one needs to think about this as an interrelated set of issues and to be thinking in a robust way. And then for any of us around the world, it is the thought that how can we make sure that we're building something that is for the long haul, because this can't be something that we look at and say that in 3 years we will have hit some sort of self-sustaining basis. Hopefully we've made progress, but this is really something of a forever game. And so we need to be building in the idea of sustainability from the start.
Great, thanks, Brad. Michael, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just that was very nicely said. I just wrote down that you know, it really takes a village, and it takes time in order to build up a culture and a community of entrepreneurship. And you can't, as Brad was just saying, you can't just focus on just the entrepreneur. You have to look at the community around them, the services industries, the government policies, the incubators, the accelerators. All of these folks need to come together and have a long-term commitment. And it comes down to the folks in the community that care passionately about this. But this is happening. What happened in Cleveland is going on in Nairobi and going on in Istanbul and going on in Cape Town. And it's, you know, these places have had sustained effort over time, and it's starting to show fruit. And it's really exciting to see this in other places, but it does take the long-term commitment of folks like the philanthropists, the donors, as well as the on-the-ground folks working with entrepreneurs every day. So I'm glad to have you shine the spotlight on this part of that village that's working together.
Great, thanks. And Deborah, a final thought or comment?
So we've answered a lot of great questions this evening, and I think that every area, every region, every metropolitan area has to look at its own challenges and its own assets, and hopefully take some learnings away from this course and then adapt what you hear to the strengths of your region. It really is about trying a lot of things, having a hunch, thinking about what may work for your region, and then doing a lot of things simultaneously. And you may not know exactly, what's causing the change, but it's probably about the interaction of all of those different efforts.
Great. Well, great final thought. And we're just about at the hour mark. I want to thank Michael, Brad, Hiep, David, I know was on a flight, and Deb for joining us today. Our next week, the video lecture is on the role of NGOs and intermediary organizations. We'll be having a Webex on Tuesday, and it will be at noon. And next Tuesday, the date is, I can't remember the date. Anyway, it's next Tuesday. And I hope you can join the 13th. Thank you. But this is great, and again, really appreciate folks from around the world joining. It was great to get questions from so many different countries. Look forward to seeing you continuing to be active in the chat rooms and the discussion boards, and we will see you next week at our Webex. So again, thank you for taking the time to be with us.